Right, so from the start, the priority of this regime was clearly the away Ashes of 2025-2026. England used every series as preparation for that series, including a home Ashes and even a home series versus India. He introduced the Kookaburra ball to some county games in the county championships, which was an unpopular and ineffective move. They started picking bowlers with their Ashes in mind, taller, quicker bowlers that bowled short, and an inexperienced spinner that they hoped would mature in time. He didn't. They also retained Crawley because he'd got a 70 in Australia. Previously, if you ignore the World Test Championship and treat every match as a preparation for the Ashes, and then lose that very Ashes you based your last 3 years on, then really you have nowhere to go and there's no excuse. Baz had a, in inverted commas, no dickheads policy, which obviously didn't stretch to the coach and the sporting director. Selection was no longer based on runs, wickets, etc. It had moved towards a player's ceiling, not being a dickhead, and how well they thought a player would do in Australia. Can you imagine if the 2009 to 2013 team England had a no dickheads policy, or the Australian side of the 90s, that there might not be any players playing? There was also emphasis on sidestepping county cricket, which was seen as a negative. The more county cricket players played, the more contaminated they became. It was like a virus. Hull, Bashir and Bethel were picked having only played a handful of games. His approach was to create an atmosphere where there was no fear of failure, and to that extent he achieved what he set out to do. There's never been a more entitled and arrogant mid-table side in the history of sport. It seems that the logic behind Key and Baz's decision is that international cricketers may well abort playing international cricket in favour of low-pressure, high-wage franchise leagues. So to keep them on board, they endeavoured to kind of create a relaxed atmosphere with no pressure to score runs, to take wickets, or even coaching to improve their technique. Marcus Trescothick, batting coach, but didn't really seem to be improving any of the players' batting and probably wasn't told to do so. They didn't have a bowling coach, but they did use Anderson as a bowling consultant from time to time on the odd occasion, but even then it was dependent on whether he was playing golf, see Pakistan 2024. To ring-fence this atmosphere of jobs for the boys, Key introduced multi-year, multi-annual contracts, moving away from the annual contracts, which presumably left players too much of a hostage to performance and scrutiny. England now able to replicate the expensive mistakes of Tony Fernandez at QPR or Farhad Mashiri at Everton and be stuck with useless or injured players for a number of years without any recourse to get rid of them. Mark Wood, aged 33, with an injury record to make Darren Anderson blush, was given a 3-year contract. Unsurprisingly, he missed most of the subsequent games, including entire test series against Pakistan, New Zealand and India. Still, at least he was ready for the Ashes. Well, the first test, and then he went home injured. Jofra Archer, slightly younger, but even more injury prone, was also awarded a lengthy contract. He too was forced home from the Ashes with an injury. Archer, since 2019, has been subsidised like a failing British industry in the 70s, Key taking the role of British Leyland. Who could have predicted that 2 permanently injured players wouldn't play the whole Ashes series? Basically everyone. It was a triumph of hope over experience and a testament to how easy it is to spend other people's money. Now the ECB have sold off the domestic game. They have more money to spend on subsidising injury-prone players, unperturbed by performance or fitness. Anderson was jettisoned because they thought he wouldn't be available for that 2025-2026 series. He's still playing now. Wokes was given a 2-year contract despite being a home specialist. He wasn't picked for this Ashes. Milan got a year contract but only played the first month. Johnny Bairstow played under half his 2-year contract. Key's eagerness to bring everyone on side was somewhat desperate and counterproductive. It does seem that Key, the media man, had replaced Key, the ex-cricketer, and substance had been replaced by superficiality. I would judge McCollum in a way I'd judge any other coach, namely on a big series, or the World Test Championship, or a major white ball trophy. He was later given the white ball job. But we could also judge him and Key on their own pronouncements. The 2025-2026 Ashes series, which they signposted, has been a failure. And the lofty ambition of saving Test cricket has not been achieved. Not there was really any criteria to judge whether they could or couldn't do it. Baz and Stokes started well, beating a long in the tooth New Zealand side and a South Africa side that had a couple of good batters. They won in Pakistan against a poor Pakistan side, albeit at a high run rate, and this was enough for Lawrence Booth and Nick Holt to write the Bazball Revolution, a book as premature as writing the Bournemouth Revolution, because they were in the top 4 of the Premier League in September. Funny enough, after winning that series, they didn't win another one for a year and a half, and this was less a revolution, but more rather expected victories against sides they expected to beat and expected defeats against sides they expected to lose to, albeit at a high run rate. As fans, we're left wondering if the English cricket journalists were genuinely bamboozled by this new style of play, or were under pressure, or felt it was in their interest to promote this regime. Right, so from the spring of 2023, we really have what I would call Bazball ups. It's pretty much a signpost to the limitations of Bazball. The one-dimensional approach in terms of tactics and preparation was exposed, even if most of the client journalists promoting it didn't point that out. Kamikaze defeats were rebounded as great games of cricket, and scrutiny in short supply, lest it interfere with access to players and TV or magazine exclusives. Actually, Phil Walker and Yas Rana said this was as good as it gets, despite this being one of the only regimes not to beat either India or Australia this century. New Zealand away, and the scales start to fall from a rise. England 1 up in a 2-test series and 4-3-5 for 8. Root on 1-5-3 not out. Stokes decides to inexplicably declare in what can only really be described as some kind of willy-waving competition. It was also a glimpse into the first Ashes test that summer. England bowled New Zealand out a few runs short of the follow-on, avoiding the follow-on, and they choose to enforce it to get the game over and done with, despite the fact they had 2 aged bowlers, an average spinner and an all-rounder who's only able to bowl a couple of overs. Hubris got the better of them, and they became only the 4th side in the whole history of the game to lose after enforcing the follow-on in nearly 150 years, losing the game by 1 run. How many runs would Root have got in the first innings if it hadn't been for that declaration? This game was repackaged by the press as some kind of triumph for cricket, rather than the Bazballs up that it actually was. The 2023 home Ashes was the first big test of the regime, and like all the other big tests they'd encounter, they failed. Australia prepared for it by beating India in the World Test Championship final, a competition that was beneath Stokes and much of the client press, who didn't really want to adjust to the new realities of cricket, learn the rules and plan a way of winning a trophy. England at the same time were in Scotland playing golf. Golf usually a stick used to beat this England side with, but it's their fault. They go on about it and they play it, and so they can't really complain when people mention it. In the first test, like the second test in New Zealand, England declared with Root on an unbeaten 100, this time with a score at 393 for 8. Hardly insurmountable on the type of feather beds produced under this management. Again, it was some kind of willy-waving or territorial pissing from Stokes, who declared to try and intimidate the Australians, and who were actually more relieved and just saw out the rest of the day's play without any issue. Anderson found it hard to take wickets on a pitch that was made flat to give one-dimensional stroke players like Crawley, Doggett and Pope half a chance of scoring runs. Baz's selection was also exposed. Bairstow selected too soon after coming back from serious injury, and Moeen Ali back in Test cricket despite not playing 4-day cricket for a couple of years. Bairstow missed a number of chances that cost England the game, and Ali was forced off injured. England failed to finish the Australian tale and lost by a couple of wickets. The first innings declaration looking more and more like a victory for empty gestures over substance, which, in a nutshell, is Bazball. After the game, Key dismissed any concerns by saying that the win Win or lose, England had inspired the kids to go out and play cricket. That excuse was absent from his analysis of Silverwood, another sign, if required, that he was marking his own homework. The second test managed to showcase both the one-dimensional nature of Bazball and the misplaced arrogance and sense of entitlement. In the first innings, England went from 188 for 1 to 325 all out, after a string of injudicious shots against the short ball. The Australian tactic was telegraphed, but England still fell into the trap because they can only play one way, leaving the field with a casual shrug. So in that game, it was also noted, also famous for Bairstow being stumped. In the second innings, Bairstow was stumped because he forgot to stay in his crease before the ball was deemed dead. This led to a massive kind of fit of pique from the side. After losing, England claimed they wouldn't have wanted to have won that way. It's almost like cricket was invented after 2022, and the only legitimate way to win matches was to score at a high run rate, bowl short, and receive a handshake from a fawning Ian Ward at the end of the match. Rain at Old Trafford meant Australia retained the Ashes. Had England not committed suicide in the first couple of tests, it wouldn't have mattered. The England team claimed moral victory, which made them sound a bit deluded. Sport isn't subjective. There's no extra points for spin or media hype.